Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Unstoppable Mindset. Today, our guest is Chris Dreyer. Chris, Chris has formed a company called Rankings.ai, and I'm going to let him describe what all that is about. And he's done some pretty interesting things with it. It has been on Inc.'s top 5,000 companies, growing companies, for the past 8 years. 8 years is a long time, which is pretty cool. So I'm sure he's got lots of adventures and lots of stories to talk about. So, Chris, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Michael. I'm excited to chat.
Well, let's start with kind of the early Chris growing up and all that and see where we go from there.
It sounds good to me.
So, yeah, let's go. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you
Yeah,
growing up in
okay.
school and all that stuff?
Okay, yeah, let me, and you just cut me off at any point because I can be a long talker.
Yeah, well,
The
so can I. I know what you mean.
I grew up in a very small city, um, Elkville, Illinois. My high school had 100 people in it. I was a graduating class of 28. I grew up, I would say, it's kind of weird. My mom and dad, if they heard me say poor, would not love me saying poor, but we weren't. We were certainly at the bottom of middle class or the upper of poor. um, I had a lot of chores. Every single weekend I cleaned a law office with my mom or did something at the farmer's market. So, and at the time it wasn't work. It was just what we did as a family, right? I didn't even understand it. We didn't have city water. We had to get a truck and bring in our water, and we had well water, right? And my family, and that was early on, right? My dad was a mail carrier, my mom was a cook, and ultimately they did better over the years and made more money. But it started off, it was, a lot of grit, perseverance, working hard, and I like to share that because my parents' work ethic is very strong, very dependable, very consistent, and that's kind of where I got my drive. But that's kind of how I grew up. Small town, a lot of side hustles with the parents, and once I went to college, I got that shock of, oh, here's a whole bunch of go from 100 to 20,000.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a shock there.
Where'd you go to college?
Yeah, I went to SIU, Southern Illinois University, there in
Okay.
Carbondale, Illinois. I actually live in Carbondale today. And, I went to college. I was always had that entrepreneurial bug. But I went to college. It was kind of to make mom and dad happy, to get that degree. But I just knew that I was going to own my own business. And I kind of had that conversation with them out of the gate. But I was a terrible student, partied a lot, you know, um, chase the women, so to speak, but somehow ended up with a degree, got a job at a high school as their JV basketball coach, and I started doing internet marketing on the side to make a little extra money because I had some downtime. And by the end of my second year teaching, I was making about 4 times the amount doing that I was teaching. So that was kind of my sign and to go pursue that full time, and that's what I did. That's when I left to do affiliate marketing and digital marketing full time. Was after that second year.
Of course, now the real question is, you were chasing the women. Did any of them chase you?
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
Okay. Okay. Just just want to make sure it's reciprocal here.
yeah.
No, that that's pretty cool though. And I was going to ask you, and you sort of answered it about your work ethic and so on. I find that if people do grow up in an environment where they're working, and they appreciate what they do get, and the amount of work that they do, and they develop a strong work ethic, or their parents have it, they generally do as well. Although sometimes there's some rebellions, but still ultimately the right stuff shows through.
Can I tell just a brief story about
Sure.
that? My mom, when I turned 16, it was like, you're getting a job, son, right? And it was not, we were fine without, but it was like, so she took me to this place. It was called Ken's Antiques, and they used to do these semi truck deliveries of aluminum, and I used to go to auctions and unload furniture. And I asked her, I was like, why did you take me there? Why didn't you take me to the mall? Why didn't, to go work at the Buckle or the Gap or something? Why did you take me there? She goes, well, I knew if you could succeed here, you'd be fine anywhere because it was the hardest job that I could think of. And I was like, oh, really? Thanks, Mom. Like, send me to the hardest job that you could think of and see if I could thrive. And I did well there, but that just kind of goes to show you the mindset that my mom had raising me, which also kind of, attached to me as well.
Yeah. Well, and I can appreciate, of course, now looking back on it, of course, but I can appreciate what she said, because if you can survive in one place, and you can, if it is a tough job, and you approach it the right way, then you'll probably be good anywhere. And there you go.
Yep, yep. To her credit, it was a very tough job. It is still to this day the hardest job from a physically demanding perspective that I had. But yeah, and it was good. It built resilience. Kind of helped me get that put that true grit on, and yeah. So that's kind of my background.
I never did really work at a job growing up. My brother did. He worked at a restaurant and so on, and bus tables and did other things. But I remember when he got his first job, he went and applied at a restaurant, and the owner or manager, I guess probably both, said, "So, we'll consider you. Would you do us a favor? There's some weeds out in the front. Would you go pull those?" And he said within about a half hour, he got the whole place completely cleaned up of weeds. And the boss came out and said, "You did all of that?" And my brother said, "Yeah." And the guy said, "You're hired."
Amazing.
Because my brother didn't even realize, I think at first, that was really a test, but it was. And of course he passed, which was cool.
That's a great story.
But I
love
never
that.
got really to do much work. I kind of was more the intellectual guy in the family, and finding jobs would have been a little bit more of a challenge for me. I did do some babysitting, but that was about all I could do. I've been blind my whole life, and a lot of the jobs that were available in Palmdale, where I grew up in Southern California, were not jobs I was going to realistically be able to do anyway. But I could babysit, and that worked out pretty well.
Yeah, yeah.
So I mainly studied.
Love it. So studied. Can I do the reverse interview? What's some of your top motivational books, business books? Because I'm sure you've got some that just pop top of the dome.
Well, sort of, kind of. I really have a slightly different idea about that, but I'll tell you, I've read a number of the main books in the whole motivational and management world. 1 Minute Manager is a book I appreciate a great deal, and I also like Dale Carnegie books like How to Win Friends and Influence People. But for me, I point out, and even to this day point out, that I've learned more about teamwork and trust and leadership from working with 8 guide dogs for the last 61 years than I ever learned from all the management and leadership books and everything else that's out there. Mainly because working with dogs, you have several things that are an issue. First of all, respecting them and the job that they do, knowing that you're really forming a team with a guide dog where each member of the team has a job to do. So in my case, the dog, and in the case of people who use guide dogs, the purpose of the dog is to make sure that we walk safely as we're walking somewhere. But my job is to know where to go and how to get there. And then I have to learn how to communicate that to the dog. And also be the leader of the pack in the truest sense of the word, which also means that if the dog is upset or there's any kind of an issue with the dog, I have to figure out what that is, and I have to read what is going on so that I understand that and can then figure out what is occurring and make sure that the dog stays happy.
Incredible.
So there's so much to learn about trust. And one of the main things I've learned over the years is, while dogs do, I think, love unconditionally, unless they're just so badly traumatized by somebody for some reason, they don't trust unconditionally. But the difference
Mhm.
between dogs and people is that dogs are open to trust a whole lot more than we are. We have just had so many things go on. We read about them in the newspapers. We see it on the news and so on. Nobody trusts anyone. The feeling is basically everyone has their own hidden agenda. And so you can't trust anyone. And so there's very little communications today. There's very little real interaction. And people, by definition, don't trust. Dogs are open to trust, and you can earn their trust, and likewise they get to and can earn your trust. And it is a combination kind of thing. So what I really learn when I go to get a new guide dog every time is I'm learning how to form a team with this other dog who doesn't speak the same language I do, who doesn't think the way I do, but I have to figure out what this dog does, what this dog is all about, and I'm the one that has to become the leader of the team and make things work. So I think that working with a dog is a lot more of a practical experience kind of thing than just reading about whatever there is to read about in books and so on. So that's why I say that I think I've learned a lot more by working with dogs than I ever got from all the management books in the world, any of the
Ooh,
Tony Robbins books or any of those.
I love every bit of that. I was on X the other day, and it was talking about the new CEO for Starbucks, right? Because the former CEO was McKinsey
Hmm.
trained, right? But didn't have any actual experience at the helm. And then they brought back the a former CEO of Taco Bell over to Starbucks, and the stock immediately shot up because of the application aspect of it. He had done the job and been in the grind. So it's kind of interesting, kind of corollary there. But yeah, thank you for sharing. I was really intrigued, and I had to jump in and ask.
Oh, fair question. And this is a conversation. So nothing wrong with asking questions on either side. So it's perfectly fine to be able to do that. Well, so what did you do right out of college?
Right out of college, the one thing I'll tell you that I still to this day I call myself an introvert. I don't think that introvert extrovert. I think we have the tendencies at all times to be either one, right?
Yeah.
But I think for me, I was more shy, but I built a lot of friends because I played sports and I knew them in college. And then they introduced me to their friends because you got to imagine when I had a class of 28 kids, it's like super small community versus, everybody I'm interacting through their connections and their extended connections. So through college, I'd say the main education thing I got was I did get a job waiting tables for 3 years. And so I got a lot of client service training, dealing with people, having a ton of conversations through my job, and also through my personal relationships with my friends and other students at the university. But so I think that kind of helped me succeed afterwards. But afterwards, really, when I student taught at Heron, they saw my work ethic. They saw
Hmm.
that I showed up, that I listened, that I took action. So they hired me immediately. Um, and I did the same when I was a JV basketball coach. I never missed a practice, was always on time, really tried to develop the kids and bring the most out of them, treated the parents well. And so I think that's what I did well. And it kind of put me in the position to have time to learn internet marketing. So I think that's kind of how it all started.
When I was getting my teaching credential at UC Irvine, and I also got my master's degree in physics from there, but I student taught at the local high school at University High School. And I student taught two classes. One was a physics class, and it was kind of for, they called it dumbbell physics, but it was kids who were sort of interested in science, but really didn't know where they wanted to go. But the other class was Algebra 1. And I remember one day I was teaching, and one of the students asked a question, and I didn't know the answer to it. And I probably should have, but I didn't. But what I said was, I don't know the answer right off. Tell you what, do you mind if I look at it tonight, get you the answer, and bring it back tomorrow? And the kid who was an eighth grader actually accelerated. So it was high school algebra one, but he was from the eighth grade. He said, sure. So I went home and found the answer in the book and went, oh, I should have known that. But anyway, came back in the next day. And even before I could say anything, he said, Mr. Hingson, I went home and got the answer. And I said, well, come up and write it on the board. And one of the things that I did with all of my classes, when, of course, we had blackboards and all that back in those days, I would want a student to come up and be the board writer because they write a lot better than I do. And so we had pretty good competitions of people who wanted to write on the board. They all thought it was kind of fun, and I did spread that wealth around. But Marty came up, and I said, "Now you got to explain what you're writing," and he had actually found the answer, which was cool. But my master teacher was also the football coach, and when I first told Marty and the rest of the class, I don't know the answer, but I will get it. After class was over, Mr. Edmonds said, you did something that's absolutely amazing and was absolutely the right thing to do, and most people wouldn't do it. And that was you admitted you didn't know the answer, but you would go get it rather than trying to blow smoke, because these kids can see through that in a second. And he said, so you did the right thing. And I've always felt that's the way to do it. If I don't know the answer, I'll go figure it out, but I will also tell you that I don't know the answer, and you can decide whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But I think it's a good thing, to be honest.
I couldn't agree more.
And so it was fun. And what the other part of the story, and I think I've told it a couple times on the podcast, is 10 years later, I was at the Orange County Fairgrounds, and this kid comes up to me. Well, he didn't sound like a kid anymore, and he said, Mr. Hingson, do you know who this is? Deep voice. And I went, no, not right off. And he said, I'm Marty. I'm the guy that was in your algebra class 10 years ago. Nice to be remembered. But he also just remembered what happened. And I think he even said it was so cool that I was honest with him about it, which was, a life lesson anybody should learn.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
So it was a lot of fun. Well, so you student taught and so on, but eventually you ended up deciding to go into the entrepreneur world. But you also were a card collector, right? A game collector.
Yeah, and in high school, I played this collectible card game. I played a combination of two. I mean, most people are familiar with Magic the Gathering, but I also played this other game called Legend of Five Rings. And both of, the collectible card games, but they're really math-based games based upon advantage and so now it's applicable to today. I can look at any, whether it's Pokemon or whatever card game there is. It was very, it's force-based, benefits to attack and things like that. It attributes to everything. But anyways, I played it competitively, and I was a world ranked player. At one time, I won 4 state championships or Cotes. No one had done that at the time in 2 consecutive years. And it was just a top player. And when you get to the top, you become friends with the other top players. And then you talk strategy, and that even takes you to an even higher level. And so I did that, for many years, competed all over the country. It was a great experience. And so, yeah, that in my house, my dad he was a civil engineer. He has an engineer degree, but he was traveling. He was on the railroad at all times, and he wanted to stop traveling. So he accepted this job as a mail carrier so he could stay put. And that's what he did. He retired as a mail carrier, but a top math expert, to the point where there would be conversations where you could, like, I couldn't understand him, right? He couldn't understand himself, right? And there's many conversations in different aspects of this. But when we played games, whether it was Yahtzee or Monopoly or whatever, every game there was a math-based lesson to it, like which dice you rolled for advantage at Yahtzee, which ones to hold after the first roll. poker games, pitch games, rummy. Every single game, it was game theory. It was math on what was the best roll, like Monopoly, the best properties and the probability to get an orange property over other properties, and how much you should spend at certain points of the game. And I realize saying that out loud, that's not normal. Some people just play Yahtzee and roll the dice and they roll what they want, and some people play Monopoly and just buy the properties they want. That was not how games were played in my household, and it was very
Hmm.
applicable to poker and to the collectible card games.
Yeah. So how often did you want to buy Boardwalk and Park Place?
Not often, but I mean, so there. That was just how I was brought up,
Yeah.
and it turned into a lot of what I do today, actually.
I always liked free parking. We had a thing where any money and any kind of thing that you had to pay on all went into the free parking pot. So getting free
Hmm.
parking was always fun.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I hear what you're saying. I love Monopoly and love to even play it against a computer, which was always a kind of a neat thing to do. But played Monopoly against other members of my family some. We actually we took a regular Monopoly board, and I think my father outlined the entire board and all the squares using Elmer's glue so that we had raised lines for me to look at. Then we
Mm.
also did things to mark the paper money so I could tell what bills I had and so on, and even
Hmm.
brailled the cards. And I still have that game to this day,
Very neat.
which is kind of cool. But Monopoly's fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of games that there's no winner. You
Yeah.
take my wife wants to play Scrabble all the time, and I'm like, there's just not a winner in Scrabble, because if I challenge you on a word and I'm right, you're wrong, you're mad. If I beat you, and then if I lose, it's not fulfilling for me. So it's like that's one of those games. There's no winner.
I have a friend who plays Scrabble with his mother all the time, and I think he loses more than he wins, but he's always proud when he beats her.
Mm,
And he's almost 60, so she's older than he is, but they play and have a lot of fun with Scrabble.
that's incredible. That's great.
Yeah, it is kind of cool. But anyway, so you eventually decided to go off and go into the entrepreneurial world, and you
Hmm.
started your company. Or when did you actually start the company?
Started the company officially in 2013. It was
Ah,
attorneyrankings.org. That was the original name. Now it's rankings.io. I worked at a few agencies previously while I was also doing the affiliate marketing, and kind of got to see the agency world of providing, the professional services space. And after working at a few agencies, thought that I could do it, right? I got the confidence from the competence, and that's when I launched in 2013. We've always been focused on legal. The difference today is primarily we're focused on a sub niche of legal for personal injury law. And we work with other practice areas, criminal defense, family law, et cetera. But really, personal injury is 85% of our business.
so what is it that rankings.io does?
Yeah, we do digital marketing. We do search engine optimization, now AI search. We do pay per click, paid social, web design, a lot of performance marketing. I would say more performance, less creative and branding. And that's what we do. We work with the biggest PI firms, personal injury law firms in the country. We're in, I think every state. We work with about 250 law firms across the country.
What made you decide to focus on law in the beginning?
Yeah, I'll say a few reasons. One, I had an experience working with attorneys and I liked working with them. So there was the like component. When I worked at an agency, I had a few firms that I spoke with and I enjoyed it. The second thing was, if I'm being honest, the status. Like, I wanted to tell my parents that I did marketing for lawyers and not just any industry.
Hmm.
And then the other thing is I'm very, very, very competitive, and I kept seeing and hearing these reports about more and more attorneys going to law school and just all this competition for legal. And the thing that I differ, you hear a lot of coaches and mentors, they'll say, hey, go to the blue ocean. Everyone's read the blue ocean book, or, Peter Thiel's 0 to 1.
Hmm.
And everyone thinks, oh, go where there's no competition. And I'm like, that's fine if you're Elon or Peter Thiel or Zuckerberg creating something new. But if you're going into an existing category, you want to go where there is competition because it demands expertise. And that's the way that I've looked at it. Like, you take the agency perspective, I don't want to go to, you know, um, lawn care SEO. Like, do they really want to do search engine optimization? Do they really have a ton of competition? Maybe that's not a great example, but you get my point where
Hmm.
if you go into the city, there's a ton of personal injury law firms, but there's only a few that can rank at the top, and they're all trying to gather cases from one another. So they want an expert to help them, get that visibility. And that's the mindset that went into it.
What strikes me as interesting, though, is that with all of that, you bring a very competitive level to what you do. And I'm not sure that I find that a lot of people necessarily even do that. So you consider even search engine optimization to be a very competitive thing. I don't want to say sport, but you consider it all about competition, and
Hmm.
you want to really bring the best and the most significant aspects of it to what you do. And that clearly has to show up when you're talking about Inc. ranking you in the top companies for 8 years in a row.
Yeah, it's very status orientation. That's why I like working with trial attorneys. There's a winner and loser in court,
Mm-hmm.
and there's only one top position in Google or on these LLMs,
Right.
and it's who's going to win, who's the best,
Yeah.
and it's right there for everyone. Here's the tally. Everyone can see who's the best, and I've always loved that. I think I heard a podcast recently by John Morgan. He's the founder of Morgan and
Morgan and
Morgan. They're
Morgan. Right.
of course, and he's always a character and funny to listen to, but
Yeah.
he talks about being insatiable. Like, how did you grow this? He's like, well, I'm insatiable. I want to continue to grow. And for me, it's the exact same thing. It's like, I'm insatiable. We hit a milestone. I want the next milestone. It is the game that I'm playing. I am playing, like, my hobby is my business. I enjoy it. I look forward to a Monday. It rewards me mentally. I enjoy the people I work with, and that's how we're at. Inc. 5,000 8 years in a row. We'll definitely be on the ninth year next year
Hmm.
due to our growth this year. And that's just how I treat it. It's just a big game, and like any game you play, Sim City, whatever, you get a little bit more money, you get a little bit more buildings, right? You do a little bit better, you hire more talent, you expand your capabilities, and you just, if you don't stop, you're going to continue to grow.
But it's a game in the mathematical sense, and it's a game in the productive sense of what you're trying to do. Is This isn't a game just, although you obviously have to have fun in what you do, otherwise you wouldn't enjoy doing it. But it's a
Hmm.
game in the mathematical sense of the word.
Oh, 100%. And so many people don't understand what I'm about to say, but like, every move that you make is a move based upon leverage in some capacity.
Yeah.
And you take, because our time is all limited, you take, I'll give you some examples, like from a distribution perspective, hosting my podcast or being on your podcast is going to have more listeners than if I go speak on stage. And
Hmm.
if I go speak on stage, now that has its own benefits of authority and different, belly to belly relationships from a trust perspective, but from a distribution perspective, I would be better off doing more podcasts than I would speaking on stage.
Sure.
So there's an advantage there, right? And then there's also advantages through pricing arbitrage. And it's, if I hire labor and talent in the Midwest, and I pay them above average fees and salaries, and I pay my employees well. But compare that to New York or California, and I think some people, these are things that they don't talk about. But when you start to look at leverage closely, it's everywhere. Capital, economies of scale. If I, there's leverage based upon my buying power in certain areas, and that's what I look for. It's an interesting way to make decisions. It's based upon that leverage component.
Do you think that that works in other kinds of arenas other than just what you do?
Oh, 1,000%.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it works in. You can see it. The closest would be closest arena would be sports. There's so many, whether it's the salary caps or the talent of one person's labor based, what they can do from a utilization or capacity versus another one's. People talk about it on the business side of like, you have one software programmer is worth potentially 1,000x another one just because of that individual's capabilities. So it's literally everywhere, and it's also dissecting different scenarios into fractional leverage.
Yeah.
I'll give you a different way of thinking about this. Is like you take an SEO specialist. A top tier SEO specialist might be 100, 200 grand, right? Technician.
Right.
But you break down their capabilities into the smaller parts, someone that just writes, someone that just does the title tags and the website, and someone that just does the links and that. Like, you can assemble that individual's that superstar's talent through breaking it down from a fractional perspective. It's just a big game of puzzles, and how you get there, and you look at like what your competitors are doing and how you can, I wouldn't say exploit in a negative way, but what I mean is how you can take advantage in a positive way to help your business succeed.
Right. Well, so if you're playing a game like football, of course, every team wants to crush the other team, and it's all about winning and beating the heck out of the other guy. Is that really the way you view it in terms of the game as you play it? And do you enjoy being able to just crush the competition, or is it a different mindset than that?
That's a really good question. Because I am an abundance mindset. I don't think everything is a zero sum game. Um, it's I'll tell you something super nerdy. I was talking to my chief of staff the other day that we're big gamers, big nerds, and we were talking about Warhammer 40K, and the dwarves in that game have a book of grudges. So anybody that that goes against the dwarves, they're listed in the book of grudges, right?
Yeah.
And it's like all the dwarves are trying to, right this wrong, and I kind of look like that. I'm like, treat people with respect, like, abundance zero, like abundance mentality, do the referral thing until it's like, okay, you've done X, Y, and Z, and I could give you examples of X, Y, Z. And it's like, okay, well, you're not my friend, you're not my ally. So now you are a true competitor by all by all definitions. And
Right.
that's how I've treated it.
And so it isn't the joy of just beating everybody in sight,
No,
which is
yeah,
different, which is cool, because certainly I would also bet though that you have people who are competitors, but they're not unfriendly, so
absolutely. And
yeah, you can develop working
I can rattle
relationships.
off, and we have great conversations. We're friends, and people are surprised when they see us and we're friendly. And it's like, no, it's like we have families, we have life, we want to do good work, we want to, and it's so you can absolutely have that too.
Yeah. Why did you decide to specifically choose personal injury?
for me, and this is turning into the math conversation, but
That's
really,
fair.
I looked at our revenue, and it was like over 70% of our revenue was from less than 50% of our clientele,
Mm.
and it was a clear directional signal to pursue this area. Um, and that's it was the math. Like,
Hmm.
these are our best clients. They pay the most. They stay the longest. Um, we could do the best work. Also, the PI space is the Super Bowl, is the major leagues in the legal arena. It's very difficult to rank. There's a lot of competition versus, I get a family law attorney. I don't care what market you're in. Los Angeles, it's like a sneeze to get them the number one or two.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like the competition. I like having to work at it and be creative and think about different things to try to obtain that top position.
Yeah. Well, so I would presume that John Morgan's happy with you.
I had Dan Morgan as a keynote for my 2024 conference, his son,
Yeah.
and I haven't personally talked to John. I think well, he says he's retired, but he's not really retired.
Yeah, he's still
Uh,
doing the TV
right,
commercials.
right. The I couldn't work with Morgan and Morgan. I can have a great relationship with them, but I can't work with them because they're in every market, and
Yeah.
they would be my only client.
Yeah.
So that's why. But certainly have a great relationship. I've got a text relationship with Dan. Um, but yeah, I think they do everything in house, anyways.
You don't want to be the consigliere for Morgan and Morgan, in other words.
Well,
Have them as your only client.
right, right. That would
Yeah.
put a lot of risk on the old client concentration problem.
I'll bet it would. But still. So, what does it mean for a law firm to dominate Google's organic search? And I guess the other question is, why is that the legal battleground that personal injury lawyers can't really ignore?
There's there's so much here. Okay, where do I go?
Yeah, it's a lot
You
of
take you take any
questions there.
channel. Broadcast television has been the main vehicle for channel for distribution. It's the lowest
Mm-hmm.
CPMs, cost per thousand. The distribution is very wide because an individual doesn't know typically when they're going to be in an accident, right? So you got to have a lot of reach and touch a lot of individuals. There's also radio and billboards, but typically, even if they watch you on television or hear you on the radio or what have you, they still convert. They go to Google to make that conversion. They go to the website. Typically, it's not always, and things are changing due to these LLMs and the native experiences on platform. But even today, it's still the final destination before they contact a firm. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really important that you show up at the top of Google to capture all of those opportunities that you've advertised for in other mediums.
How do you do that?
Well, so I'll say I'll try to simplify for the audience. Let's just keep it really. Think of like a Venn diagram of the three circles overlaying, and you've got the middle. You have to do all three. The first one is you have to have excellent content. You have to have, if you're an auto accident attorney, you have to have content about auto accidents. You have to have, you have to have content that targets phrases and words that consumers will search for, right? It
Mm.
starts with the content. It has to be thematically and topically relevant. It has to be excellent content. The second component would be related to reviews. You got to get Google reviews to show up on in the LSA, the local services ads location. You have to get reviews to show up in Google Map Pack. You need reviews now on Yelp to show up on and to be discovered on these different LLMs, particularly ChatGPT. And just due to how, okay, for the SEO nerds listening, let me explain. Because typically when you get reviews on Yelp and when you get reviews or recommendations on Facebook, they aggregate that information to other sites, which is then the listicles that form the basis of discovery for these LLMs. So you
Hmm.
got to have a review background, so content, reviews, and then links. Google, the way that they differentiated against AOL was they use links as a categorization method. So if you're trying to win an election, you want to get as many votes as possible. If you're trying to win the first page of Google, you want to get as many high quality links as possible. High
Right.
quality being authoritative, relevant, trustworthy, sites that get a lot of traffic. So you need great content, a lot of reviews and links. That is the very 80/20 high end summary of how to rank in Google search and on the LLMs.
Yeah. Well, and how does LinkedIn fit into what you do?
LinkedIn's a bit different. LinkedIn, more B2B platform. I think if you're a business attorney or a B2B firm, it's an excellent channel. I use it from a distribution perspective. I get a lot of reach. I get a lot of followers on there.
Hmm.
A lot of attorneys congregate on there, and it's a great, channel for recruiting talent. And it's cited frequently if you have some type of reputation perspective that you want to control around your name. LinkedIn typically ranks in one of the top 3 positions for your name if you have your profile set up properly. So yeah, it's got great distribution from a leverage perspective, and it has other applications as well.
If you were starting a law firm today or you were advising someone who's starting a law firm, how would you deal with and start their marketing efforts? How would you organize marketing for them?
Yeah, in the beginning, I would do almost all performance marketing. I would do very little with brand because you need to get on your cash acceleration cycle is very poor from a PI perspective. I'm always
Right.
thinking from an injury law firm perspective because, if you get an auto accident case, by the time they get treatment and go through the whole process, it could be 12 to 18 months before you get
Hmm.
paid. So, I would think about performance marketing, Facebook ads, Google ads, LSA, SEO, a lot of the ads platforms that are, very performance driven. That would be the majority of my investment. Facebook ads. So in a vacuum, different markets are there's different channels that are more effective, but in a vacuum, I would say today, right now, Facebook ads would be the best platform, the best channel for that.
Hmm. Because it has such a high volume of viewers or what?
Well, it's just the cost per lead. The amount that you pay on that platform to reach your target
Yeah.
prospect is going
Got
to
it.
be cheaper than say you go to Google Ads and you're paying $600 a click for a phrase, or it's just now there's again, this is in a vacuum. There's very effective Google Ads strategies. You can get creative with performance max campaigns and different strategies, but I would say just in general, Facebook ads out of the gate would be one that I would start with. And I would start
Hmm.
the SEO early just because it takes time to develop.
Yeah. Well, and that makes sense. And it does take a long time. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand how all of that works, but it's still something that they should deal with.
1000%. And it's a game of it's a long game. But even SEO can be on a shorter time horizon. If you're like if you target car accident lawyer in that phrase and that segment, then sure.
Yeah.
12 to 18 months is even 2 years before you start to get some visibility. But you target dog bites, you target you know some other case types that aren't as competitive, like you can get traction sooner.
Hmm. Well, and that kind of brings up the question you talk a lot about, and you wrote a book about niche. Why is it that going into like a smaller niche can yield sort of a greater opportunity, or by narrowing focus, you're creating bigger opportunities? Why is that?
So what comes top of mind, the most important reason is it all centers around this word focus. When you focus in a single area, you become better. Well, because you are better, you can charge more because you're worth it. The other thing is when you focus on a single area, you can create repeatable processes, and everything is not bespoke when it comes in. So you can set up your internal productization of a certain area. It makes training easier by immersion. So there's a lot of benefits, even the perception aspect of it, right? So when you think of like who's better, a generalist versus a brain surgeon, you think a brain surgeon's a specialist, and you think, well, who do you think just offhand whose fees would be higher? Well, you think the brain surgeon would charge higher fees.
Hmm.
And so from a perception perspective, and when you're thinking about trust, that's the other one, right? You would think from a trust perspective, they would be more qualified because they're in this certain area. So, and when we're trying to convert someone in sales, it's always a conversation based upon trust. So those are some of the main advantages. The one heavy disadvantage is TAM, total addressable market. It's you focus on personal injury, you're at 50, 60,000 firms. You focus on all law firms in the United States, you're at 400,000 law
Yeah.
firms. So there's trade-offs for, there's pros and cons on both sides.
Well, and that makes sense, but there is a lot of merit to the whole concept of specializing, and you've proven it with what you do, and you continue to be pretty successful about it, and that makes a lot of sense. But you also do something else that I think is interesting. You've written a book, niching up. You've got a podcast. You have other things that you do, and of course, just the company itself. But you put all of that together, and all of that not only has to help your brand, but it makes you more visible in the marketplace overall, don't you think?
Yeah, it certainly does, and it is our flywheel, right? It's somebody that's on my podcast could be a potential quote in my book, and I have a personal injury lawyer marketing book, right? And there's quotes from the pod. I have now a quarterly magazine that goes out. We could cherry pick a couple episodes, to include in the magazine. We have retreats that are quarterly. They're in person, that because we have a community, they're easier to fill. We have a yearly event for personal injury law firms called PIMCon. So it's all this flywheel that kind of compounds over time due to the community aspect.
But people obviously react well to it because you continue to be successful.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is I am I am not the expert. I am bringing on the experts in their field, the people that are eating their own dog food, so to speak, right? They're
Hmm.
practicing what they preach. It is, I can orchestrate a great conversation because I know the space and can ask very specific questions based upon my knowledge. But I'm bringing on, Dan Morgan was on the pod. I've had, let's see, Morris Bart. I've had Frank Azar in Colorado. I've had the biggest of the big PI attorneys on sharing what works for them,
Hmm.
which is very valuable because it's not a consultant or me or whoever speaking about like, oh, this is how you can grow a law firm. It's no, this is the owner of a law firm explaining how he or she is growing their law firm.
Right. And providing that advice for other people, which also helps you gain trust,
Hmm.
which
Yep.
is pretty cool. What's the best way for an attorney who wants to stand out to truly build authority in the market?
Well, if you're look, okay, so there's a couple types of firms. If you're a trial attorney and you want to get peer referrals, I would say start a podcast would be one of the best ways. Interview your peer, interview other attorneys around the country, talk
Hmm.
shop, speak at CLEs, you know, do those types of aspects. A podcast. I'm not saying it's not good for B2C, but it'd have to be a different type of podcast.
Yeah.
So I think B2B, if you're a litigation attorney, a podcast would be great. If it's B2C, that's tricky. I think I think probably social media, um, in some capacity, but really it's just sharing your knowledge on a platform and being consistent.
Yeah. Consistency counts for a lot. And it is something you can show as being relevant in almost any kind of business. I mean, look at McDonald's. One thing you can generally tell about McDonald's is that their quarter pounder is going to taste the same everywhere, and it's going to be the same. And companies and people can learn a lot by seeing a company that truly develops that level of trust.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
And that's pretty important to do, to be able to get someone who is going to earn that trust by vigorously working to earn that trust. And so there's something to be said for that, needless to say. So you've built a very large company. What would you say are some of the pivotal moments that sort of helped shape your trajectory? I know you've talked about some things, but what kind of really are the things that stand out that really helped you create all of that?
I think in the beginning, I did a lot of free work and had to prove my work, prove
Mm-hmm.
my abilities. I think so many people just want to charge a lot out of the gate. And I think when you do things for people, they're more willing to reciprocate. And from an application perspective, it makes you better. So I did a lot of free work early, a ton of free work. I took a lot of jobs or contracts that maybe, not maybe, for certain that I wouldn't take today that were just
Mm-hmm.
not perfect, but like they were my opportunities that I didn't, let them pass by. I think hiring the right people, having super high standards is incredibly important. People that share your values. In the beginning, I used to, every time I heard a speaker talk about culture or values, I used to kind of roll my eyes and say, "I just
Mm-hmm.
get to work, right?" But now I know it's more important than ever that they share my values
Right.
because they're important to me, and that's how you move forward. And I think the other one, if I had to say, the bigger I get, the more important good data is to make decisions. Like if I don't have good data, it's very difficult. I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
And the better the data, the better the decisions.
Well, so the other thing that comes to mind when you talked about doing a lot of free work and jobs that you wouldn't necessarily take today, I don't know how much it really entered into your mindset, but think of all the knowledge you gathered by doing that that you might not have ever gotten.
Yeah, I mean that's true, and a lot of other people wouldn't have done those jobs, so it's kind of some unique
Oh, there you go.
perspectives.
Yeah. When I hired salespeople, one of the first things I always told them was, you're coming into this, be a student for at least the first year. Don't hesitate to ask questions of your customers because they're not, if you gain their trust at all, they're not in it to see you fail. They want you to succeed, but they want to be able to trust you. And so there's a lot to be said for being a student, asking questions and learning from that,
I agree. I agree.
which makes a lot of sense.
hmm
What's the biggest misconception that lawyers typically have about marketing?
They underestimate how many dollars and what it takes for someone to actually be memorable or build a brand.
Mm-hmm.
I heard Alex Hermosi talking recently about, no one really knew who Jennifer Lawrence was before the Mockingbird movie. And they spent $50 million on advertising for that movie. And then, oh, suddenly everyone knows who she is, but it took $50 million to do so. I think a lot of times people think they oversaturate a channel when they haven't even scratched the possibilities or the capabilities of a particular channel.
How do you help lawyers break through that misconception? I agree with what you're saying. I hear it a lot in so many ways. But how do you break through that and get them to understand the value?
It's a dance.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
dance.
it is a dance, isn't it?
I try to get them to look at the blended cost to acquire a case as opposed to, the CAC to LTV ratio versus trying to pinpoint each individual channel. And try to solve with data and proof over, guesses, or promises, but it is always a song and dance.
The data and proof is out there if people can learn to look for it. The reality is mostly it's not a guess, but you have to know where to look or learn how to find the data to be able to get the answers that you need to demonstrate that marketing is just as valuable as anything else. I mean, there's so many strong lessons about marketing. We talked about Morgan and Morgan, but think about it. He's out there doing TV commercials all the time. And I'm sure that that's helping his company, he and Ultima continuing to grow. And now they got the boys all in it. And the reality is they've demonstrated that they understand something about what marketing is all about. I remember back a long time ago when it was taboo for lawyers to even advertise. And then a couple of companies out here started to do it. And finally people realized there's a lot of value in marketing.
Absolutely. And Michael, I should have said this in advance. I got a hard stop. I got a client call here in 2 minutes.
Well, then let me just ask, is there anything else that you want to add, or how can people reach out to you if they'd like to do that?
Well, first of all, I really enjoyed our conversation. So thank you for having me.
Yeah.
For anybody that has a question or wants to connect with me, the best way to get in touch with me is by email. I'm an inbox zero guy. It's Chris, CHRIS at rankings.io. I'm most active on LinkedIn. You'll just do a search for Chris Dreyer and you'll find me.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank all of you for tuning in today, wherever you are. I'd love to hear from you. Love your thoughts on the podcast. Give us an email at michaelhi@accessibe.com. Also, you can listen to any of our podcasts. They're all available, and you can find us at michaelhingson.com/podcast, and you can see and hear all the episodes that you want from there. Please give us a 5-star review and a great rating wherever you're listening and watching us. We value it a lot. And if you know anyone who you think might be able to be a good guest, love to hear from you. Chris, you as well. If you know anybody else who you think ought to be a guest, I'd love to definitely get your help to bring them on, because we're looking for all the people who want to come on and show that we're all more unstoppable than we think. But again, I want to just thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Michael. I really enjoyed it.
If you're ready to go deeper into the ideas that shape how we see ourselves and others, I have a free gift for you. Head over to michaelhingson.com and download my free ebook, Blinded by Fear. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep choosing to live with an unstoppable mindset.